Good evening. It is 5:30 p.m. Welcome to this regular meeting of the Fargo Board of Education, where we are committed to educating and empowering all students to succeed. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I look for approval of the agenda. Robin.
I move approval of the agenda with the HC addendum.
Second.
We have a motion from Robin and a second from Ally. Any discussion? All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposition, same sign. Okay, next up, we will turn to some recognition from our audience. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and home school district for the record. We ask that speakers refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond to or debate issues in this forum. This evening, 2 speakers have signed up to address the board. Each speaker will be allotted a maximum of 3 minutes. Upon conclusion of the allotted time, a chime will sound and the speaker is asked to conclude. If necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds later, signifying the end of the speaker's time at the podium. I will now call our first speaker to the podium, and that is Paul Stalkup? Okay, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Stalkup. I was born and raised in Fargo. I live about halfway between Ben Franklin and Madison Elementary. I'm a graduate of Horseman Elementary, Ben Franklin Junior High, and a 1974 graduate of Fargo North. I spent 27 years working in the Fargo Public Schools, my first 2 years in food service at Horseman, 21 years in food service at Ben Franklin, and my last 4 years full-time as a paraprofessional at Madison Elementary. Madison was challenging but extremely rewarding. It gave me purpose in my day that I was lacking. Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts. First off, thank you to all Fargo Public School employees for what you do for our students. To members of the school board, thank you for your commitment to our students and staff. Whatever differences we have, there is something we all have in common. We care about all students and staff. I know some of you and have met a few of you. I did not vote for all of you and do not agree with all your views, but I absolutely support the chair you sit in and support and respect the person sitting in it. I vote for people who I believe are honest and willing to listen to others with different views. Also, those who I believe will do their homework and educate themselves on the inner workings of the Fargo Public Schools. I wonder how many people realize the many committees you serve on, how many meetings you attend, and the fact that you have jobs outside of your role as Fargo School Board members. I've watched meetings go 2 hours plus, and yet you're still engaged. To all school board members, do the best you can for as long as you can. Nobody can ask for more than that. Be well.
Thank you very much, Paul. Our next speaker is Heather Johnson.
Good evening, and thank you to the Fargo Public Schools Board and Superintendent Gandhi for this opportunity to share my thoughts regarding the proposed community-driven redevelopment plan, in particular, how it could potentially impact the Hawthorne neighborhood. My husband and I moved to the Hawthorne neighborhood in 2014. A compelling factor in our decision was the opportunity to send our future children to a split campus model public elementary school. The appeal of a smaller school, smaller class sizes, and walkability were impossible to resist. I have since become an engaged member within my neighborhood by actively participating in the Clara Barton Hawthorne Neighborhood Association, Clara Barton Hawthorne PTA, and I participated in every meeting conducted as a long-range facility plan committee member. But to be clear, I am speaking for myself now and not on behalf of the aforementioned organizations. When I first encountered the LRFP process, I was steadfast in my sentiment that Clara Barton Hawthorne remain a split campus school. However, my participation in the LRFP committee allowed me access to information I may otherwise have not looked for. One thing I learned is the amount of money it costs the school district to educate a student. At Bennett Elementary, the 2022-2023 cost per student was $8,542, and the total enrollment was 666 students. Centennial Elementary was similar. The per-student cost was $8,438, and the total enrollment was 562 students. In a stark contrast, the cost to educate a student at Clara Barton Elementary was $14,986, and the total enrollment was 162. The cost to educate a student at Hawthorne Elementary was $9,210, and the total enrollment was 184 students. Upon learning that information and knowing how budgets tend to work, I could not in good conscience continue to advocate for the split campus model. I now support the merging of the Clara Barton and Hawthorne campuses, which leads me to my concern regarding the proposed Fargo Public Schools community-driven redevelopment plan. While a number of statements received 75% respondent support, none of those statements expressed a clear desire for housing as a replacement for the Hawthorne site. However, both conceptual site plan examples feature housing as a major component. One example illustrates the addition of a new street on the site. I am an advocate for the Hawthorne site to be repurposed as a Fargo Public Schools employee child care center offering wraparound care services. This site is centrally located, adjacent to the district office, and already outfitted for youth learning and care. Repurposing the existing infrastructure for this concept feels not only fiscally responsible, but it would also help address the child care crisis our area is currently experiencing. This could be a lucrative pre-tax benefit added to the incentive package that Fargo Public Schools currently offers its educators and administrative staff. In my opinion, this option also more closely reflects the desires and wishes of the neighborhood residents. Thank you for your time. Sorry I went over.
Thank you, Heather. Next up, we have our reports. Laura is not here this evening, so we do not have an FEA report. And that takes us to Robin with our legislative update. How are we doing, Robin?
We're hanging in there.
Okay.
Thank you. You all know that the personal electronics use bills both passed in both chambers, so stay tuned for how that comes through our conference committee. 1144 was heard in Senate Education today, and that was the single stall bathroom concept that I will not share my opinion on. Well, I will share my opinion on that. So this started out as single stall bathrooms with communal sinks are a best practice that reduces bullying, vaping, fights, cell phone pictures under a stall, wall, etc., as well as being easier for staff to monitor. They're all ideal for students, and we're still perplexed into how this preferred architectural guidance has morphed into a transgender issue. So we will continue to oppose this. When it was heard in Senate Education Committee, there was some discussion, and there was no action taken, which was interesting. Let's see here. 1329 is the DPI funding bill, which is also kind of linked to Fargo Public Schools funding as well. There was not any discussion about changing the 2 and 2 to a 3 or 3 and 3 or 4 and 4 or increase SPED funding, but Emily O'Brien out of Grand Forks submitted an amendment, and I will send that to you about some financial transparency. There was some back and forth on that. House Bill 1540, which is, it says it's an ESA bill, but it's really a voucher bill. That was heard in Senate Approps today, and it has a $40 million fiscal note. It was really nice to hear some discussion and understanding about how public funding works for schools. Although we have an $11,000 per pupil cost, the word that they didn't use is mill levy deduct. And so somebody very astutely, a legislator, said the actual cost that the state contributes is about just north of $8,000. And so the goal of this I'm going to call it a voucher bill, 1540, is to provide $4,000 for each family to cover half of the cost the state has for public education. And there is no means test on this. So anybody that wishes to use those dollars for public dollars for private education choices has the right to do so. And that seems to be gaining more momentum over 2400, which is the ESA bill. So no recommendation was made. 2400, the companion, well, it's not a companion bill, that is not scheduled on the House floor yet, but we are watching. And in closing, 2241, which is a charter schools bill that uses public dollars for publicly run charter schools. I'm still trying to figure this out. That was scheduled on the House floor today, and it prevailed with a vote of 64 to 29. So really, there's just a couple policy bills left in the bathroom bill, and then we're heading to approps and everything else. So I try to keep you updated as we go. Happy to answer any other questions.
Do we have any specific questions? Okay, thank you so much for your updates. We appreciate how in tune you are with all that and keeping us all up to date. Next, we move on to our administrative report. Do you have anything beyond the community redevelopment plan?
Nope, not at this time.
Okay, great. So we will turn to memo number 91. And I think we have some guest speakers. Was somebody going to introduce this and then have them step up, or do you want? Okay, that'd be great. Thanks.
I can go ahead and introduce it. Today, we have our presenters on our community redevelopment plan. We were really fortunate to be able to get a little bit of a preview at our Communications Engagement and Advocacy Committee meeting with the board. This plan was created should some aspects of our long-range plan come to fruition. The board had decided that we wanted to have this additional piece of engagement with community members that would potentially be impacted if any sites are repurposed down the road, and what could that potentially look like. And I think that was why we hired Confluence with Folkways and Pros Consulting to do this work, and we are excited to see the report today.
Thank you for having us here. We're excited to present what we found. This was a 5-month-long process, and we're going to condense it down to 20 minutes for you. So if something seems like we're kind of glazing over it, there's a lot more information in the document, the supporting document that you guys have. So what we're going to talk about, we'll just give you a quick overview of the project in case you're not familiar with it, introduce our team, and then we'll go into our project approach of how we listen to the people, gathered information, analyze what we found, and then share with you our kind of professional recommendations that came from what we heard, and some next steps for you guys as you're thinking about how to move forward. So, this text is a little small. About the project, the redevelopment of these school sites presented a unique opportunity to transform the spaces into valuable community assets that continue to serve their neighborhoods. Fargo Public Schools knows these schools are important aspects of their community, so just really happy that you guys saw that and you want to keep these sites as valuable places in the neighborhood. I like this graphic. It shows the 4 school sites we were looking at and the stars of where the new sites would be, and the pink arrows show actually where you would go to get to the sites, and you can kind of see that orange area around each school site is a 10-minute walk shed, so you can see how far students would be traveling to the next school. Project team, I'm Laura, I'm with Confluence. We're a landscape architecture firm in town. Also on the team, Joe with Folkways, and then we also had another consultant, Jane with Pros Consulting, that helped us with some of the social inventory. And Folkways, you guys helped with all the public engagement also, of course. So.
Great to be here with all of you tonight. I'll say that this was a unique project, and I think important to call out that often when groups like yourselves hire consultants, there's a very clear set of deliverables. You're looking for an engineering plan or a scope of work for a building to be built. I think there's a lot of foresight in this type of project, which the deliverable is really the findings from public engagement. So the intent here, as you may know, was really to go and to listen to the public to hear what could be with these sites long-term into the future. Now, we know since when this project started till now, a lot's changed for the district, both work at the legislative level in terms of funding, succession of Dr. Gandhi, and more. I just want you all to know that I think that it's still very important that the work that you've funded and is done for public engagement is meaningful, even though things are changing and you might not necessarily know where you're headed with long-range facilities. We heard repeatedly in the process from the public, once people understood why we were out doing public engagement, they felt really seen and heard that the district was thinking so proactively 5-10 years into the future. When we finally got through sort of the questions about the school, the long-range plan, they said, oh, this is really just about what if could be for the future of these sites long down the road. I could still people relax a little bit and just feel really appreciated that the district was thinking that far into the future. And so we hope that you find these insights useful, and I think continue to do public engagement. I think it's a really important thing for public institutions to be proactively listening to the public and gathering insights. And in our case, our approach, we really wanted to take a methodology of gathering sentiment. So often, sometimes you have groups that go out and it's a direct democracy. You're asking people specifically, what would you like to see in a specific location? And because this was so far into the future, we said, let's start with values. Let's start with what people care about, why they like these core neighborhood schools, what they miss in their neighborhood, what they appreciate in their neighborhood. And trying to gate that sentiment and then take the insights and the analysis from the landscape architects and the demographics of the area, as well as other plans the school district has done, the park districts have done, the city has done on core neighborhoods. We started with listening, trying to really understand where are people at with a long-range facilities plan, what do they know, what information do we need to provide, as well as the gathering of the insight, the sentiment, and then that analysis part, and then finally the sharing of our recommendations. So before we really dove in, we just went out and started listening to the public, started to understand where people were at. I will say that our project was focused on the future potential redevelopment of these sites that would no longer be schools. Most of the questions we were fielding were about the long-range facilities plan. So I think we really felt like we were the tip of the spear out in the public talking to people about this. And there's a lot of concern, a lot of misinformation, a lot of not knowing where is the process, is it done, did I miss the boat, have these decisions been made? And so I would just encourage all of you, as you think about doing a bond referendum in the future, there's a lot of groundwork to be done when it comes to strategic communication. A lot of the conversations we were having with people were not about what could be, but were about what's happening, what's not happening. So that's really where we started in baseline in order to try to move forward into our work. We did a solid amount of public engagement. We had about 92 sentiment surveys completed online. We did 4 school visits ourselves to better understand the facilities that we were looking at, as well as about 32 individual conversations with stakeholders and listening groups, then 5 neighborhood workshops. I'd say that given the amount of time that we had and budget, this was a good amount of public engagement. There's always more to be done. It's kind of an eternal spring of how do you keep gathering information from the public. But I think given the timeline of everything, we felt good about the amount of public engagement we were able to do on your behalf. And so when it came to the sentiment gathering, we did a number of different surveys to really gather kind of people's values and desires around what they believe for the schools. And we use this to inform our professional perspective as landscape architects and designers to think about what could possible schemes be for the school district. So we did a sentiment survey where we got good feedback back from the public on things that they agree about from the survey. So statements like the school is an essential part of the neighborhood. I enjoy attending community events at the school. Access to parks and open space is important. And you'll see in our findings that we go into detail around these, which are what are those things that people value in the community. And I think that this is a really helpful piece because I think this is informative for all of you for the long range plan. Regardless of the redevelopment site, where are neighbors sitting with these sentiment gathering, these values? But we also had pieces come back where people shared that they didn't feel optimistic or they didn't feel that they were being heard. And so I think both what people agree with and what people disagree with is equally as important. And so I think this was a real call to action to say public engagement is really important. And I think it's really critical to think about how do you have that feedback loop with the public. And then also, when you're hiring consultants, how do you make sure that our strategic communication's in line with the school district? We try to be really thoughtful being out on the streets, communicating with people that we were agents of the district. And so how we were talking about this project really mattered. We wanted to be thoughtful about that on behalf of the district. So in turn, just thinking about how do you take something like this and then in turn communicate the findings back out to the public.
So after the listening and gathering portions, then we go into analyzing. We're looking at all the data and kind of trying to find themes that start rising to the surface. And with all the different comments we have, how can we group those together? The overarching themes between all 4 schools were pretty similar, with the exception of Madison was just a little different. But the things, like I say, that boiled to the top was fear of the unknown. No surprise after what we talked about kind of regarding the long-range facilities plan. How can you respond to fear of the unknown? Improve communication. We give some ideas on how to do that. The other challenge and concern that came up was that these people value the current location of the school. And if it moved, there'd be significant logistical hurdles. That was in the case of the Madison School. How do we respond to that? Well, as Fargo Public Schools, you can highlight benefits of the new location, and then also think about implementing flexible transportation options if logistics is a big issue. So we go into some ideas for that. Third challenging concern, fear of losing their sense of community. Based off of the other slides on what they value, that wasn't a surprise to hear, and it came out loud and clear. So we need to prioritize community spaces and families. Yes, please.
I think as you saw on the maps, we were looking at the Hawthorne site, the Roosevelt site, Madison, and then Ben Franklin. Not that surprising, the Hawthorne Claire Barton site had the highest level of public engagement in terms of the 4 sites we're looking at. It's the most organized, it had the highest socioeconomic stats around that. And I think in the same time, as you saw, the school being moved is still within a 10-minute walking shed. So it's still within that contiguous neighborhood. Ben Franklin is a middle school, a little bit different. Middle school parents are very different than elementary school parents. And so even the public engagement discussion was much more challenging. It's a little bit more removed. People are driving farther for that site already. And so the discussion about it going to McKinley wasn't as sensitive, I think, as the elementary school. But there were conversations about saying, hey, that's pretty far north. I'm south of 13th Avenue. Just kind of general questions that people had, as well as real comment about, hey, how does it make sense that we would tear down this building? And I think that's a strategic communication response, which is y'all are looking at the economics, the cost of students maintaining these facilities, but a number of people were like, you can't tell me that it's cheaper to do this. And so I think that's just a hurdle to be able to overcome in communicating that. Madison was a real outlier. Despite the sentiment gathering or what you'd like to see at these sites, pretty much everyone said they wanted the schools to continue being schools. Roosevelt Horace Mann, still within a 10-minute walking area, so again, different hurdle. Madison, on the other hand, though, I think as you all have seen and you look at the socioeconomics of that area, there are real challenges in not having a school in that neighborhood from a transportation standpoint, from a food access, after-school programs. That analysis was not our job as part of this project, but we just saw a lot of that as we started digging in and having conversations. And so just want to make a footnote as you think about the plan that Madison site, I think, facilities-wise, I think there's real rationale in combining these, but I think there's a soft side, socioeconomic, community neighborhood, that individual learning aspect where we heard countless from teachers about almost the small town school feel that Madison has, that a parent can trust a teacher to say, hey, I'm gonna have my son walk home because they're sick and I can't get off shift to do this, or the ability to have the food program within a radius that's really walkable within the school. So again, the meetings we had in Madison were like save our school pitchfork meetings. They weren't like, oh, we get this, we kind of understand where this is headed. It was like, you can't close this school. And so put us in kind of an awkward position at times because we're saying, hey, that's not what we're here for, talking about the future, but I think just wanted to relay that in terms of our own experience. And I think just the power of continuing to have those discussions with the parents and the school as well as the staff at all the schools had really great conversations.
Yeah, well said. So I'll kind of skim through these slides quickly, but fear of the unknown, these were, I'm not going to read it word for word, but you can kind of see these are some of the comments we were getting. Hesitancy about losing a historical landmark. That was in the case of Roosevelt. What's a transition look like? Uncertain of decisions that have been made. Some ideas to improve communication. Just, I mean, kind of speaks for itself. It goes without saying, but value current location, logistical hurdles. You can read the comments, kind of things we were hearing that we summarized into these, into this challenge. Once again, ideas, how to highlight benefits of the new location, implement flexible transportation options, safe routes to school, prioritizing like a shuttle maybe for after-school activities, examining the city bus route, allowing students maybe free city bus transportation. These are just, haven't looked into the financial means of this, but it's ideas of how to help ease that fear. And losing their sense of community, all very valid concerns by the community. And if you're afraid of losing your sense of community, well, then we need to prioritize community spaces for families. So things we heard over and over were like reservable community space, places that are appealing for all ages, strengthening connections to adjacent parks, still having after-school programs, all these things.
We tried to be realistic when we were talking to community members and providing examples of what redevelopment could look like. I think one reason that we were hesitant to just go to the public and say, what could Ben Franklin be, is that we're not acting in our capacity currently as like a development strategist. They do exist, finding a feasibility and viability. We didn't want to have a list of things from the public saying, hey, we really want a Fuddruckers at Ben Franklin or something. You know, we wanted to provide insights based on sentiment that are realistic for people to be able to pull off of. I think with that as well, something that I want all of you to know is that I think as a school board, there are other redevelopment tools for you to access beyond just deciding an RFQ and who do you sell it to a private developer. I think that we heard from the public that people wanted there to be public benefit from these sites. So whether that is community space or as previously mentioned, you know, daycare center or training. So one idea that we've done some research on but became out of scope, but is the idea of a land trust. And so the notion that the district might be able to own these lands in trust and then do land leases. Without getting too complicated or into the nuance of this, it's a mechanism for the district to be able to have a private development on a site, but not have it be privately owned. And so you might have houses be built, you might have commercial projects be built, but there's still entitlement and control that the district has about some of those outcomes. Locally, already in our community, we have the Cass Clay Land Trust, which is a project that started as a means of trying to build affordable housing. This is a great local example, and I think that as an institution, there are ways for the district to think about these redevelopment sites and to have it not simply be, well, who do we sell it to? There's other options beyond that that I think can benefit the public and benefit the outcomes of the school district in addition to educational outcomes. As we get into some of these examples, these are really thought experiments of what could be. These aren't development suggestions on our behalf. These aren't intended to say this is the best or highest use or the only scenario for redevelopment. But based on the conversations that we had with the public, as well as our professional insights and gathering insights from the core neighborhood plans, that's why we pulled some of these things forward to say, hey, we think that aligns with the school district and with the community to say, how do we get truly affordable housing? If you look at these sites across the whole inner city of the school, Fargo Public Schools could be responsible for the greatest increase of affordable housing in the city's history, depending on how these sites are redeveloped. So that was a thought experiment for us to say, wow, that could really be a powerful thing and be really meaningful for our community. It's not the only way that these sites could be redeveloped, but we also didn't necessarily know who are valid partners. You know, things came up. People said, what if Boys and Girls Club partnered? We said, that's a great example. That's beyond sort of our scope, so we wanted to kind of avoid the hypotheticals of what could be in these sites, but please know there's a lot of potential uses for these schools. One example is up at Roosevelt. Pretty adamant from the community around the school of preserving the historic nature of that. I think that there's a lot to be said about our past and our history and being able to honor those things. Some said, hey, if it was turned into apartments like Woodrow Wilson on University, that would be tolerable for me, but I'd love to see it be a community center. And could you have small rental spaces that provide a community need? So just some of the examples of the feedback we heard from people, but we'll have Laura go through kind of the examples of the potential uses of the sites. And again, these are a thought experiment draft on paper, just to give you an idea of the capacity that these parcels hold for redevelopment.
Yeah, and I see we're getting close on time, so won't read this word for word, but these were some of the things that came up in our public engagement as potential site uses, imagery that we show people, and then they can put a dot, do you like this, do you don't like this? That's kind of how we get ideas out of people too sometimes. So this is, like Joe said, just a draft, one example of many of how the Hawthorne site could be developed. We heard and we really liked the idea, and after talking to Fargo Park District, creating a connection to Dill Hill and Island Park and some of the work they're doing over there. So we could emphasize that, have some mixed-use buildings, spots for, like was mentioned, a daycare or maybe some light retail, a community space as a public plaza, a playground for the neighborhood to use, and then this idea had a pocket neighborhood with some attainable housing on it and possibly a road going through. Madison, different potential site uses. They're more focused on it still being an educational facility, but they do need things like a grocery or convenience store, improved green space, and they really like the idea of some type of community center.
Madison was interesting as well, because I think that in that neighborhood there's a lot of attainable housing already. And so as we thought about the capacity of this site for more housing, it was not necessarily it was more like next step housing. There are many people that want to keep living in Madison, but aren't necessarily able to grow into a new space or say, hey, I want to upgrade my home. So again, this was just a thought that we had in pulling a lot of insights from the core neighborhood plan. So I think knowing that we didn't do this in a vacuum, we're referencing other planning documents that our community at large and other institutions have been drawing from. Because Madison is really well placed to the industrial park, and having residential housing within access of other places is really important for a healthy city. But again, there isn't anyone who's saying, hey, as a private developer, I can make it work to do housing here. And so I think this notion that housing is something that happens for capital gains is not necessarily the only way that community housing should be built. And so other pieces from this, I think, was that utility. People talked about a barber shop, a grocery store, just things that the school in small ways plays a part in. But if it weren't a school, what could it be? But the number one thing that people wanted here was a school, was from our conversations.
Yeah. Roosevelt, some ideas with its being close to NDSU, possibly higher education facility, but improving the green space, maybe moving it off of such a busy street. Let's see. Options for, we didn't show housing in this plan, but possibly all of these sites could accommodate some housing. This site plan, like I said, is probably the most similar to what's existing, just because there is a lot of emphasis on keeping the historic building. But like we said, maybe moving the playground into kind of a quieter, safer, a little bit more private area off of 10th Street would be nice. Reservable community space still was a big deal. Ben Franklin, looking at the school, it wasn't as old. I know the facility itself has its challenges, but it sounds like a lot. I mean, the gym is getting a lot of use. We heard that a lot. What would we do without a gym here? And so probably, once again, the indoor recreation is big. We've been finding that out, so could be nice to have. This one we added, well, the other thing we heard on the north side of town is and we know it's an aging population there. They don't want to move out of their home to move to, West Fargo or South Fargo. They'd rather stay on the north side. but there's nowhere to go. And so then the young families have nowhere to move into. So we thought this site did lend itself for some more housing. So we've just staying within the context of the neighborhood. This neighborhood has a lot of rental fatigue, we like to call it, from being close to NDSU too. So doing single family housing, maybe alley access, get the garages on the back so it fits within the neighborhood. More cottage, court, pocket neighborhood ideas, playgrounds still.
I'll also note, and some of you may be aware, maybe not, the city of Fargo currently is going through a land development code revision. This is something that is, I think, really important for our community and happens once a generation almost, not quite. And so as we look at these, we did get questions from the public about what could be, and I think people limiting their ideas because of land code. They said, well, we can't have a coffee shop here because we can't have that within the development code. And I think we're fortunate that the land code is being revised. And as you maybe have seen from the growth plan that the city of Fargo put forward, that's really the cardinal document they're using to develop the land code. And so how the land code takes shape shouldn't really be a mystery. It's mapping the plan that was done on where we want growth to happen in our community. So a lot of these ideas become very possible with the revision of a land development code, where I think in the past people say, wow, that's not possible, or how do you zone for that, or it becomes very complicated. And as design professionals, we feel very optimistic based on how the land code process is going. And I think time's out nicely with this. That'll probably be done in a year and a half. So well before kind of anything happens here for long-term redevelopment. But just some more context in terms of other work that's happening at an institutional level.
Then that's it. Next steps. We do have a project contact list that we can, if we haven't already sent, we will follow up with all the people that we were engaging with. They want updates, of course. So we'd recommend doing that. Just continue to build community support and explore these potential partnerships.
Yeah, I want to thank you all for the time. No, this is, as mentioned, a unique project. So our findings are really in the written document of all the public sentiment we gathered. That really is the deliverable. But I hope that you feel this was a useful set of dollars in hiring an outside firm to do so. I do believe the public really values the opportunity for public engagement. And I think there's a lot of meaningful ways moving forward with wherever projects you're working on to thoughtfully engage with the community. And it's not always easy, as you know well here, that often people get fired up when there's challenges or they're angry, and it's sometimes hardest to get people to come to the table on things that they feel medium or even positive about. But I think developing that capacity as a district to say we really value public engagement, we're thinking about mechanisms or strengths or processes to do that regularly can go a long way. And we definitely heard that from the public. People were really appreciative to have folks out on the ground at the schools after hours having conversations and holding space for the what could be of these future sites.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. We might have some questions, so maybe don't run away yet.
Yeah.
But I do want to remind the board that we're not taking any action. There's no motion or recommendation on here, but we do have time for some discussion. So if we have any questions for our, it looks like, oh yeah, we got a lot. Let's start with Robin.
Thank you. I love the idea of a land trust. I also want to remind everybody, some of these neighborhoods are ripe for nonprofit grants, Section 8 housing. They're right on the, Ben Franklin's right on the edge of being community eligible for some other pieces. So there will be supplemented money that's available for some of these nonprofit organizations. So this is pretty exciting.
Melissa, Chris, who has it? Melissa?
Sure, yeah. So thank you. I can tell you've been really thoughtful about this and I appreciate it. I just actually had one question. It looks like in our packet of information, you asked the residents of the Hawthorne neighborhood, if the school wasn't here, what would you like to see here? And if I'm reading the sticky notes correctly, it looks like you got a few votes for car wash. And I was just curious if that was actually the public sentiment.
Thank you for this question. We hosted the public engagement in conjunction with the Hawthorne Neighborhood Cookie Social. And so we had a number of your children in the room. And so the Starbucks and the car wash, I think, were light humored cookie social sticky notes. So we decided
was-
not to omit those from the
Thank you.
findings.
Okay, I
but
was
yeah.
hoping, but I was like, I really don't understand. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kristen?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. This is really exciting, especially coupled with what Robin had to offer. When we were at our National School Board Conference this weekend, I met quite a few folks who represent community schools. And I really think that is kind of an interesting concept, especially when we're thinking about Madison and some of these neighborhoods that would really lose their identity, or really seek the importance of a school up there. Community school building, meaning access to services, like we were talking about barbers or after school care, daycare could be that's what this gives the feeling of. And it also is very innovative. And I think this, coupled with the work that Fargo Parks is doing and the work that the city is doing, we could really make something special. So I really appreciate your ideas. And I think that once the community can kind of see the benefit to some of these, and kind of like we're thinking, pie in the sky, like big ideas right away, that could bring some really, really good things for our community. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Ally?
Well, this is the second time I had the pleasure of hearing this presentation, and I just, again, thank you guys for all of the work that you've done on this. Like my fellow board members, I'm very excited about the possibility of what could be, especially the land trust idea. I know Joe and I talked about that a little bit last time, and really just understanding what we can do with in these communities and keeping the sentiment of the public at heart of the decisions that we're making. So I truly am grateful the work that you guys have done. I love the land trust idea. We learned a lot at the National School Board Conference, and just really about when you think about consolidating these schools, one of the tips that they gave us, our best practices to share, was we're not taking away your school, we're giving you access to more resources. When you go to a 3 to 4 section elementary school, the ability to have people that you can connect with, have access to different opportunities, different educational opportunities, different clubs, different unique opportunities for these kids. It's a matter of, we're not taking something away from you, but we're giving you access to more. And I understand that, anytime we talk about closing a school, you get that sentiment, that emotional gut reaction. But know that we're listening and that we want the public to continue to stay engaged. So thank you again for the hard work, and look forward to continuing to partner.
Very welcome. I might add another comment on that. I think that there's a real opportunity to sharpen your pencils on the strategic communication. I think that once we started talking to people and explaining some of those things, hey, what a 2-section versus a 4-section means, these split libraries, split art programs, that hadn't really permeated out into the public, I think, as sort of a key messaging piece. And so as soon as we were able to kind of move through that to talk about the what ifs, because 40% of the conversation was about consolidation and what does it mean. So we really felt like when we were reviewing the plans and talking to Marianne and being like, okay, how do we talk about this in a way that makes sense to the public? Another note I'll say about redevelopment approach, and this is one that is, again, creative like land trusts, is the idea of a redevelopment authority. And this might be something that actually could be a big idea for the district, the park, and the city, which is there's a lot of publicly held land right now. And I think right now our community's only seeing examples as public-private partnerships, or we're going to take a proposal and hire it to a private developer. There are other communities across the country that put together development authorities. So you think about this like we have a Fargo Dome authority or an airport authority. They're a publicly appointed body that work on behalf of the public, but they sit outside of publicly elected officials, and it gives them the ability to be more specialized in the work that they do. And so in addition to something like a land trust, could be a both and approach, the district could create a development authority. So you'd actually have a expert in development or a developer working on behalf of the district for public benefit, being able to negotiate and get into the messy conversations and having some of the work that development takes that doesn't always suit itself for public open conversation. Examples out there, but again, just another tool in the tool belt is like a 10-year idea where it's like, what could our community look like if we had a joint development authority on public behalf across the district, the schools, the parks, and the city, to really think about public benefit.
Thank you. And I think the first sentiment of what you're saying, we definitely saw that when we kind of did that deep dive into our other survey results. It's just we need to do definitely some more strategic communication so people understand what's really involved in this whole project. Were you going to add something, Dr. Gandhi?
Yeah. One of the things that I think we've talked about early in the process too is that while there is some overlap, the school district boundaries don't always match what the city qualifies as a neighborhood boundary. And not oftentimes the people that kind of show up for engagement are the parents that actually have school-age kids as well. So when you were going through these engagement processes, did you see higher level of engagement from those that are parents, those are within our school district boundary, or those are within what the city calls that core neighborhood?
I mean, I think in the example of Hawthorne, Clara Barton, there's existing public engagement infrastructure through the neighborhood associations, and those bounds more closely match where the school district is. Honestly, I would probably say that the level of engagement probably is more dictated based on, I'll call it privilege or socioeconomic ability. So in the neighborhoods that have less socioeconomic freedom, the public engagement is lower. It just takes more work and more energy to invite parents, whether their schedule or what it looks like. We try to be thoughtful with that by providing food and thinking about partnering in order to value people's time in a way that I think really honors taking time out of their day. So again, Hawthorne had the highest level of participation. Madison also had strong participation, but I think that's a credit to our attunement to inclusion and really thinking about how do we honor people's time and make sure that we can provide a public engagement activity that is thoughtful for people and meet them where they're at.
Yeah, to add to that, we had two events at Madison. One was we were just piggybacking off a science fair they had, so that was, or a STEM fair they had, so that was school people. But then we worked with the neighborhood church in the Madison neighborhood, and the engagement event we had there, the room was packed, and it was all ages, and I would say at least half the room was non-parents. They were just kind of advocates in the neighborhood, so, yeah.
I think I was also surprised to see just how much perception affects my own coloring of things and learning more about the Jefferson and Hawthorne neighborhoods as well, just the challenges that they face there as well. It's not as isolated or called out as Madison is, I think, in our community as a school that maybe is higher free and reduced lunch. But in meeting with the principal there or seeing the facilities and understanding the housing stock around the Horace Mann Jefferson schools, also really real challenges there as well. And I think, as you all know, in the desire to improve the facilities, I think really creating higher quality spaces for those students and parents will make a big difference. And seeing some of the facilities at Horace Mann is just really real bummer. It's really hard to see, and I think those are also pieces the public just doesn't understand right now currently in terms of the real need to reinvest into neighborhood schools.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the time and effort that you put into this and bringing this information to us.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so we are now moving on to the consent agenda, and I will look for approval. Go ahead, Namal.
I would like to approve the consent agenda with human capital action.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Namal and a second from Nikki. Any discussion? All in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Any opposition, same sign. Okay, and next we have one item on the business agenda, and this is coming to us from Dr. Bob Gross. Do you want to introduce this to us?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you. Attached to Memo 94, you will find a draft 2026-27 school calendar. The calendar was developed by this year's calendar committee. There were 16 members on the committee. We had parents, teachers, and principals from all three levels, elementary, middle, high school. Students, district office representatives, FEA was part of it, support staff, and a school board member. And before I go too much further, I'd like to publicly thank the calendar committee for all the work that they did. It's not an easy job, but they did it very, very well, and it was wonderful conversations. Our first meeting started by looking at a set of data. We looked at the most recent calendar committee survey. We looked at previous calendars. We looked at the North Dakota statutes, the teacher negotiated contract, and also then some of the co-curricular proposed schedules. all as just foundational work. None of them directly led, other than statute, of what we wanted to do. And then we also looked at EL 14, which was executive limitation that the board has given to the calendar committee. We met over the course of many evenings, and on the first evening, the first task was to decide how we would come to consensus. The committee kind of did some counting of how many members there were, and as a group decided that 76% would be the consensus mark, and that was just to make sure that it was rounded up to an even number. I'm glad to say that the calendar that's in front of you actually got 100% consensus as we move forward. After each meeting, when we would start building a portion of the calendar and the time would run out, we would stop. I would send the calendar to the committee, they would share it with their peer groups, and then we would start the next meeting just going around the entire group, asking for their feedback, the pros, cons of what they heard, and then we continued the building of the calendar. After our last meeting, like I said, we came to 100% consensus to move this forward. So what we did then is, following our administrative policy, I did reach out to all the PTA and PTOs across the community, shared with them a version of the calendar that's in front of you, and then set up a Teams meeting to answer any questions if there was any. After that, we are here tonight, and that is to share with you the calendar. What you'll notice on the calendar, there is some color coding that's there. The blue, there are two different shades of blue. The darker is semester 1, and the lighter then would be semester 2. Thank you. I'm actually using a pilot of a laptop, and I don't have the software on the machine to project. So I needed assistance, so thanks, Bill. Also, beyond that, what you'll see, the green would be the professional development days that are marked on the calendar. The orange or gold there are the holidays that we must have off, either according to statute or contract. Anything that is in gray on this calendar white on this calendar are just days off. They are not counted towards either contract or the number of days that we have with students. And then finally, the last color code is the yellow days, and those would be the 2 storm days that the calendar committee built in. So with that, I would stand for any questions that you might have about process or the draft calendar.
Thank you. Do we have a motion so we can start conversation? Oh, or sorry, do you want to ask a question to Bob first? Go ahead. No, you can ask. I'm sure it's fine.
Just a quick question, because I don't want to mess with anything you have 100% agreement on. Just so I understand, I know we try each month to give the teachers at least one break. I see in April there are, well, I guess there's that one day off. Was there any discussion? Did they feel like spring is breaking and we can survive April without a long weekend, or?
So I think some of the conversation centered around there is, one, you'll notice there is not a week-long spring break in this calendar like there have been in the past. The rationale for that was where the required day off was in the month of March, and how we could then build both a storm day and a non-contact day around that to at least give some type of a longer break during that month. We did actually have one of these storm days in April, but we thought, you know what? Just like what we just saw now, you never know when we're going to have bad weather. So the idea was to push that into May, and knowing that we would come off of that longer break near the end of March, it would be about 4 weeks or so until we had another break or a short week, and then you would have the remainder of the school year, was kind of the conversations that we had as a committee.
Thank you. Ally?
I just wanted to add a piece to that end of the April-May timeframe. That's also testing as well, right? So those 2 weeks, that first 2 weeks of May is our end of the year testing for our junior high and high school students. That was a big part of the conversation as well, in terms of why we put those days off before and after that 2-week period too, so.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Okay, do we have a motion? Okay, Namal?
I would like to recommend that 2026-2027 school calendar to be approved as presented.
Okay, we have a motion from Namal and a second from Ally. Any further discussion or questions? Robin?
I noticed that NDUS calendar is not out yet. What is the conversation between higher ed and our school calendar? Because it has huge repercussions in our community.
So the calendar committee did look at any calendar that was readily available. So if there was a calendar, we tried to review it. It didn't drive us on where our days off were, but we certainly had those conversations. We are out front of many other districts when it comes to building the calendar, but we are trying to share this with parents so that they can make plans as far away as they can into the future. So it may not line up directly with other calendars, but we did the best we could.
One follow-up, without having the whole week of spring break is helpful as well. So I like the calendar as a community partner. Let's just put it that way.
Thank you. I think one thing that drove this calendar committee is you will notice the last day with students is before the holiday at the end of May. And that was something that this calendar allowed just because where the other holidays fell.
Dr. Gandhi?
Yep. First, like Dr. Gross, I echo the sentiments and gratitude towards our calendar committee because it's not an easy position, but thank you for the great work. I just want to highlight, I know Dr. Gross knows this as well, our superintendent students cabinet was all of our students from all of our high schools. They were extremely vocal when we talked about the calendar, sharing that should, the second semester, which is our normal practice, start after Christmas break, having at least almost 2 weeks chunk of time to come back in and then finish your finals and then get into that. So thank you for being able to have that as well. And then just for Dr. Steiner, good luck waiting till May to figure out whether or not we're still going to have a makeup day to utilize.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Ally?
Sorry, just one more. I just wanted to thank Bob for all of his hard work on the calendar committee. He led those meetings efficiently, effectively, and it was like he had clearly done this before. So thank you for your leadership, Bob.
Anything else? Okay, I think we're ready for a roll call. Berglund?
Yes.
Clark?
Yes.
Day?
Yes.
Gullickson?
Yes.
Jason Nelson?
Yes.
Kristen Nelson?
Yes.
Robin Nelson?
Yes.
Ollenberger?
Yes.
Christensen, my near? Yes. Motion passes 9-0. All right, and that takes us to our board reports. I'm going to start with Kristen for our committee liaison and correspondence reports, and I'm also asking each of you to share very briefly a couple key takeaways or highlights from the National School Board Association conference that we all just attended. So Kristen, you're up first.
Okay, so I have nothing to report from a liaison or community engagement, but so from just a couple thoughts from the conference, a lot of the sessions I attended were around equity and belonging, themes that the overarching theme was that each child carries an invisible backpack of experiences that we can never know about into school every day. And, that is how they're coming to us. So these experiences are the reasons why we as leaders and educators must do our best to ensure that all of our students feel safe and secure in our buildings, ensuring that they know that somebody in their building cares for them. We do this by training in restorative practice, community building, zero tolerance on hate speech and bullying, just a list of best practices and some fun ideas that I have for leader.
All right, thank you very much. Let's go to Melissa.
Yeah, so I'll first share from the negotiations committee. We had our first negotiation session with the FEA last Wednesday, April 2nd, and it went really well. We both had shared ideas for ground rules prior to meeting, so it was pretty streamlined as we went through it. And we have hashed out all of our ground rules. We set our agenda for our next negotiation session, which will be on April 15th. And at that time, we're going to be exchanging the topics that we will be hoping to negotiate throughout our entire season. We set dates through the end of May. Right now, we're on a schedule of about once a week. We'll sit down, and that's either going to be on a Tuesday evening if we don't have school board or a Wednesday evening if we do. So just want to thank Cabinet and the committee for being so well prepared for our first session because it went really well. And I also attended the conference in Atlanta. It was great. I did. I focused a little bit on more legal liability issues and went to one session on the First Amendment that was really fascinating. And it really kind of made me inform and make sure that we're wearing our hat of when we're regulating speech, like what that looks like. I also attended one about belonging that Kristen had mentioned, and I just wanted to give a shout out to at least my liaison schools that I'm familiar with. We're doing a lot of the best practices for making sure that kids are in school and staying in school. And one of the main things that they were really emphasizing is ensuring that each student knew and had a trusted adult in the building. And I know we do a lot of work towards that. So it was very encouraging to hear that. And then also one that touched a little bit on on negotiations was a special education seminar and kind of best practices you can do to retain, recruit, and support our special educators. And we talked about stipends and then also using technology to try to streamline all of the somewhat burdensome paperwork that a lot of state and federal regulations have. So all in all, it was a great conference, and I'm grateful that our district supports us going because I think they're always really valuable.
Greg.
Other than NDSBA, the only thing I would have to report is I attended the cardboard boat regatta on March 27th, and that was fun. It was worth the all the chlorine I inhaled for sure. Yeah. So NDSBA, I think one of the more interesting sessions to highlight that I don't think anyone else went to had to do with trying to really expand computer science curriculum in a meaningful way that goes beyond like the hard skills that have been kind of associated with computer science over the last like decade or two, and really kind of expanding it to apply to a lot of the skills that we think of when we think of profiles of a graduate, which is another session I had attended, and thinking of it more as problem solving and creativity. And to that end, it was I thought it was really interesting to see like bringing computer science to like the middle school and even potentially elementary school level, which is really not what you think of when you're like, we're going to have kids write, C# code to render images, stuff like that. So that was interesting. And the only other thing I would add is I think it was really cool to be there with this group of board members because I don't know, unlike some other conferences, it seemed like every time we had 10, 15 minutes together between sessions, we would all be talking about really meaningful conversations that we were taking away from different sessions. And if someone went to a session, they said, oh, that was really terrible. I didn't really get anything out of it. Someone else would be like, oh, well, I got a lot out of my last one and some really cool conversations and even a discussion about land trusts.
Okay, Robin.
Sorry, you choked me up a little bit there. Okay. I will also just report on NSBA. One of the first ones that I went to that I enjoyed it was called Partners Not Clients. I did share the PowerPoint with all of you, and it was really the concept of really shifting from parent involvement to family engagement. And Anne Marie did go through that today, and she said it had a pretty detailed plan, and our district is doing a lot of that. So would like to see what CEA feels about that. Lots of federal federal changes and impacts on locals. No surprises there. I will let somebody else talk about AI because that was very interesting, how school boards can help lead education in the future. One thing I learned is there's closed LMMs and versus open LLMs, and neither of them are completely private, but I'll let somebody that knows more about that than I do. Probably the most impactful session I went to, and I happened to go to the wrong one actually, was Invisible Chains, the criminalization of Black girls in the school to prison pipeline. I cannot say enough about how much I learned, and I work with this population on a daily basis, and what they described was spot on. But I learned so much about trauma-informed care, really understanding the situations that a lot of our populations work with, and I just can't say enough about that. So when we get the PowerPoints, I'll be sure to send that out.
Thank you, Robin. Nikki?
Thank you. March 26th, I attended the Native American Commission. We had a retreat. They have new leadership, and so they're looking at making some changes going forward, and it was a fascinating few hours to spend with them. Yeah, on April 2nd, we started negotiations. Melissa mentioned that. NSBA, there were several really good sessions, I thought. It was hard to choose in some instances. Just for those that haven't attended something like that, we had like 8 to 10 sessions to choose from and then kind of pick. So when you walked in and somebody was sitting there, it was kind of a surprise. In which case, partners, not clients, was at the top of my list as well. And as chair of CEA, that is something that we will be looking into. Really liked that one. Student voice and school board work was another one. Different ways, different means to bring the student voice into the work that we do. And the third one that really kind of caught my eye was the cell phone use in schools, because it's been so top of mind with our legislative session. I was really surprised to see some of the statistics as to how that's impacting what our kids are learning and how. And there's a delicate balance, because sometimes they're required for teachers use them as part of their curriculum. And there are other times that one district saw a tremendous jump in their learning in their math and English within a year of saying we're not going to have our phones in our classrooms. So a lot of really good information. And I too, like Greg, I said one of the greatest things when I was telling my family about it is that we all got together, we all connected, we all shared what we thought, what we liked, what we didn't like, what we didn't know. We were a very engaged and chatty group, and I really appreciated that.
Yes, we were.
Namal?
Well, thank you. This year was kind of interesting for me because I had to bring my son along, who's almost 6 months. And I would like to appreciate all my 8 board members, because they were all hand-on too as well while we navigating the whole thing together. And he seemed pretty friendly, as you all probably already figured out. And he wasn't crying much. So, and I also got a babysitter, okay? So that's how I'd be able to attend most of my everything that we were there for. But there is a particular session that really caught my eye so much about what's going on in our state itself, and that is how to navigate public fund for private schools. And that one really caught my eye so much that I even end up getting sick in that place because it's so packed with people. It was like over 140 people in that room in the morning, like 9 a.m. And my allergy kick in, so I was sneezing at the same time while I was listening, and I was writing too as well on my note, because the beauty thing about going to these sessions is that there are sessions where you can put notes in and write and so forth, which I did. That was a perfect piece for me. But what I got out of this is there is a way to be able to defeat these kind of bills, that I have learned. And I wish that, we learn these trick, and how to be able to mobilize our communities and and making sure that we educate them what bills are actually is there that can affect them and affect their kids and affect the community overall in general. Texas did that. They actually, and can you believe that? I was like, what, really? That was an interesting piece. And then also to just overall, the voucher piece is just incredibly sad for our community. And I think that for our countries too as well. It's not only for North Dakota itself, is all over, but I just hope that, our community can really pay attention more, and we need to educate our legislator about the voucher and how it can affect our public fund to be taken away, to be given to private school, whom they're not even going to accept all the students, and when we talked about it, it's more like disabling the public schools, and that's exactly what it is. So that means if you actually take all these fund away, what is the school going to do? Obviously, I kind of saw where they're going with this, but at the same time, it's more to me like, okay, we already have lower income communities. They're still not going to pay enough money to pay for their private school, even if they go to the private school. Even if they take their kids to private school, they're not going to afford it. So basically, they're just disabling public school just for their own benefit to get richer. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Namal. Yeah, I know there are many individuals and organizations really working really hard to defeat the voucher bills here in North Dakota, and we're grateful for that and for Robin's time that she puts into that too. Jason?
Nothing to report for my liaisons, just the highlights of the NSBA conference. The meeting K through 12 infrastructure needs was good, validated a lot of the work that was done before I was on the board, and since I've been on the board regarding long-range facility plan, was spot on what we need to be doing. Also talked about the importance of timing, community engagement, and communication like Joe talked about today, and we have some work to do there regarding some of those needs. The other one that stuck out to me was a superintendent evaluation process, just a focus on leadership growth. It was a presentation from the state of Kansas. Talked about ongoing yearly progress meetings with the superintendent, driven by conversation with measurable goals. Had a scale of 4 compared to our current one, where it's just satisfactory or unsatisfactory. It's something I'd like to dive more into as we move forward. And then to echo what Nikki already talked about, the cell phones in schools, while campaigning, heard from a lot of parents, a lot of teachers that they'd like to see them gone within the classroom. And if you have some honest conversation with some honest kids, they'll tell you that they are a distraction. So a lot of good information there, and I look forward to moving forward with that at some point.
Thank you. Allie?
All right. So I do have one outside of the community engagement to talk about outside of the ND SBA piece. Last night I had the opportunity to attend at Longfellow, hosted by their PTA, was North Dakota Internet Crimes Against Children. They went through and they brought in, this is funded through the Drew Wrigley's office, and their police officers, they get tips about sextortion and crimes against children across the internet and how they're utilizing a multitude of these social media apps to do so. So this program is something that any of our PTAs or PTOs can bring into the schools. They will teach both parent groups as well as student groups. I work in technology. I felt like I had everything locked down and I knew everything in terms of how to keep kids safe. And I learned a bunch last night. So one of the things that I learned that I will share as a key takeaway is setting a pin on your kids' settings. So I can go in and I can set all the privacy settings that I want, but they can just go in and change something because people will coach them to do so. Something like an app like Roblox. Oh, you want Robux? Okay, we'll go change this setting and then I'll send you money. And then all of a sudden, all that privacy information is now wide available to these predators. So I highly recommend taking a class for any parent that ever gives a kid a device. one of the things that they shared last night was we take X number of hours to obtain a driver's license. We have X number of hours that we take before we do hunter safety. But yet, how much actual training and teaching did we ever do with our kids before we handed them a device? And it was huge. So, moving on to the conference, I thoroughly enjoyed my time with my fellow board members. Robin, you forgot to share that you learned how to mute a group chat.
Well, thank you for bringing that up.
So yes, we did do a lot of talking. We did communicate a lot all about all of the things that we were learning. So it was a huge, valuable trip for all of us. One of the key takeaways or quotes that I learned that I wrote down was, we always have an opportunity to teach. That was in one of our communication sessions. The other thing is that the first one was learning how to govern. And I remember sitting next to Katie and I was like, yep, we do that, we do that, we do that, we do that. And talking with one of our board member from, I want to say, North Carolina, he's like, oh yeah, we don't do any of this stuff. And it was a good, outside perspective to realize that Fargo does have a very well functioning board and that we do have a lot of consistent policies in place so that we have things that run very smoothly and can have that opportunity to speak as one voice. My favorite sessions, I geared myself towards long-range facility planning stuff and transitions for superintendents, as well as just overall basic governance as a new board member. The cell phone session was very, very valuable, I found. If you haven't had the opportunity to read The Anxious Generation, that was one of the premises that they had done in terms of a book club. They used that book to kind of spearhead the conversation and really brought in that community engagement piece on how they looked at forming their cell phone policies. I think where we're at as a state, we're further ahead, obviously, than where this district was. This was talking about their experience almost 2 years ago. I know we've already talked about it at the District Engagement Committee as well. So I think we're in the right place to move forward with setting up a great policy within Fargo Public Schools that's going to meet the educational needs for our kids. Long-range facility planning session that Jason and I attended, I learned a lot. I gave some homework to Jackie already about what we can do. Very passionate about making sure our long-range facility plan comes to fruition. The work that went into it was wonderful. And last but certainly not least, superintendent transitions. Corey, I have a whole roadmap for you, so we're ready to go. But no, just really grateful for all of the things that we learned. A shout out to the hummingbirds was one of the presentations that they brought in for us during one of their general sessions. You guys, these girls were so talented. I wish those of you that weren't there could have seen these kids. I mean, I literally had goosebumps for their entire presentation. It was so moving and so talented. I just love it when kids are able to bring forward their awesome gifts and share them with others. So yeah, that's all I've got for now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Allie. And so for my report, before we went to NSBA on March 31st, there was a Mayor for a Day contest that the city of Fargo held. And so a few of the cabinet members and I were there to see two winners receive their awards. And they read their essays on what they would do if they were mayor for the day. And they were quite lovely. You can find them on the city's website if you want to check those out. I read there were 46 submissions. And so we got to see the top two on that day. In terms of ND or NSBA, I also, a lot of what was already mentioned today, I attended this session on liability with Melissa, where I learned a lot of really wonderful things, including just a reminder that I do not speak legalese, so I am unbelievably grateful that we have Tara and another attorney in our space that can help us navigate that. I also really enjoyed the cell phone and community engagement conversation. And then the session on the key work of the board just reminded me how grateful I am that we have had past board members and Anne Marie get us to a place where we have such a well-functioning board at this point in time. And I hope that we are successful in implementing what we learned from how to smoothly transition from one superintendent to another. So that was another great session for us. So I think, the last thing I was going to say is please make sure you get your paperwork into Anne Marie if you haven't done that already. And we are not using our executive session this evening, correct? Okay, and so with that, I will just friendly reminder that our next meeting is April 22nd. It is 6:48 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned.